What we're going to be going through today is, I believe, talking about call hunting and dealing with native call queuing. Is that right? Before we kind of get started with this lesson plan, what I kind of want to go over is I kind of want to whiteboard with you guys and just show you guys what it means to actually do hunting in the first place, okay? In my environment right now, I have a bunch of phones that are already set up. As you guys can see here, I got phone 2001 all the way up to 2004, okay? The primary thing that I want to show you guys is exactly what we need to configure for hunting and all the different kinds of options that you get with it, okay? One of the things that first has to happen when hunting is we must configure what we like to call a, let's do this, a hunt pilot, right? Hopefully you guys are familiar with this concept. A hunt pilot is a dialable number inside of Call Manager. We can make this number anything we want. It's an internal number, okay? For our example, what I want to do here is I want to create a hunt pilot that's known as 2999, just so that you guys can see it work, okay? At some point in time, what we will see is that the hunt pilot is going to point directly to what we like to call a hunt list, okay? And at some point, inside of our configuration of the hunt list, which I will demo for you guys, we will be able to see that there is a prioritization that we can put within our hunt list. Like, for instance, we can go over here and we can hunt to line group number 1, right? And if inside of line group number 1 we have phones associated to it, let's just say I have a phone over here and a phone over here. Let's say that this is 2001 and let's say this is 2002. That's great, okay? I would hunt to 2001. If they don't answer, go ahead and ring over to 2002. If they don't answer, you could additionally put more phones inside of that line group, and or I guess you can also prioritize another line group 2 over here, and then if you put 2 other phones inside of the second line group, which would be 2003 and or 2004, you would distribute your calls to the second line group in this case if you configured it, okay? I don't know if there's any limit on how many line groups you can put within your hunt list, but it is a prioritization, which means if I am going to do this whole hunting concept, right, you can only hunt to a single line group at a time. I cannot hunt to multiple line groups, okay? So if you have it set up to go to 2 different line groups, as I've depicted here, it will only go to line group 1. Once you've exhausted all resources in line group 1, you are now going to go over and hunt to line group 2. But you can't hunt to multiple line groups at the same time, okay? So this is basic call distribution, okay? By no means is this going to be a contact center solution. And the main reason for that is because we don't have a way to report on any of this stuff. Like, I don't know how long a call has been queued, you know, I can't report on those things. So again, this is just basic call distribution. By no means is this a contact center. Okay, folks? So anyway, we're gonna go and configure a hunt pilot. We are going to go and configure a hunt list. And then we are gonna go and configure a line group, okay? Now, one of the things that you guys will have to realize is what happens first, right? When you make a phone call, you must dial that number of the hunt pilot of the 2999. Eventually, because you dial that number, it's going to start funneling down to the hunt list, down to the line group, and then down to your phones. So we see that logically what happens is that everything flows downstream from this picture, okay? But when you configure this thing, the configuration order, it must go backwards Okay, you must configure this illogically. So as we go through and we look at the configurations, you'll see that I'll start with the line group first and then move my way up to the Hunt Pilot. Okay, Cisco does a pretty good job of indicating what you should be configuring first and what you should be configuring last. Let me show you guys that. Okay, before we move on to some of the more advanced configurations, does anybody out there have a question about this process or anything? Okay. Let's go and look at some of the configurations. Again, I am going to look at the configurations on a bottom-up approach. I got to configure this stuff backwards, right? So when you go to Call Manager, which I have a Call Manager set up already, a couple of things to kind of show you guys before going into the Hunt configuration. I've already configured 4 phones here within Call Manager, okay? And if I minimize this, you can tell that I already have those 4 phones kind of up and running, ready for this distribution. So, you know, as we go in and we take a look at some of these configurations, these are basic phones registered to my Call Manager. I didn't do anything special to them, but these phones need to be in the system for me to add them inside of my line group configuration. Okay, when we decide to start hunting, the first place that we're going to go to is we're going to go to Call Routing. Okay. Then you're going to go to Route Hunt, and then you're going to go over here to the Route Hunt section where we hit the line group. And you'll notice the configuration order that Cisco gives you is I would configure it top down. So notice, you know, with the picture that I drew you guys originally, people dial the Hunt Pilot. At some point, it points to the Hunt list. And then that Hunt list is going to point to your line group configuration. Your line group is where all of your phones are going to be added onto, okay? But as you know, we have to configure this illogically. So that's kind of why Cisco kind of puts it in order as so, right? We configure the line group first, the Hunt list second, and then the Hunt Pilot last. And then after that, we'll be able to demo and see exactly what's, you know, how our results work, okay? So, I guess the first thing that I'm going to go to here is I'm going to go to line group, and I'm going to add a brand new line group here. And the one thing that I'm going to do, I'm just going to call this test line group so that you guys know what it is. There is an RNA reversion timeout. What this means is in seconds, how long am I going to ring a particular phone for? Okay, so for testing purposes, I'm just going to make this 5 seconds, right? Just something that's quick so that we can test this stuff. Inside of your line group configuration, you also have a distribution algorithm. Top down means that if I added, like let's say I added 2002 to 2004 inside of my line group as such, in this particular order, if I do top down processing, that means that anybody that dials the Hunt Pilot will always ring 2001 first. And then proceed to 2000, or I guess 2002 first, then proceed to 2003, and then to 2004, okay? Top-down processing is not very fair because it's not fair to the very first person within the list here. And let me see if I can make this a little bigger for you guys so that you guys can see it. But yeah, 2002 in this case would always be ranked first, okay? I don't know if you guys want to do that. There are also other distribution algorithms like circular. For instance, in circular, if I have 2002, 2003, and 2004, it will always ring to 2002 first. Then, or I guess ring to 2002. If he answers the phone, right, the next person to dial the Hunt Pilot will then ring 2003, right? If 2003 doesn't pick up and then it rolls over to 2004, what's going to happen in this particular case, if 2004 picks up, the next person on the list will then be 2002, next time someone dials the Hunt Pilot, okay? So circular is a little bit more fair. Longest idle timer can work too. Ring the person that hasn't talked on the phone the longest, right? And or you could do a broadcast. Broadcast means ring all 3 phones at once. The first phone that picks up, I guess, wins out of the 3. okay? In my experience, I don't know if there is a hard limit on how many phones you can put inside of this line group. I never hit the maximum, right? So I don't know if you guys will ever encounter that problem either. But that's one of the main decisions that we have to make here with the distribution algorithm, okay? I'm gonna select circular for right now. Then you have some hunt options here that we need to talk about. In your hunt options, you have something known as a no answer trigger, okay? Now let me ask you guys this question. What do you guys think the no answer trigger means? Because there is an option associated with it, right? But what does no answer mean to you guys? I dial into the hunt pilot, 2999, right? If you dial into this hunt pilot of 2999, eventually we know that that's gonna trickle down to our phones at some point, right? So it's gonna go down to your hunt list, that's gonna trickle down to your line group, and then in the line group configuration, which is where we're at, that's gonna define exactly what phones are inside of our line groups to ring. But here's the thing about the no answer trigger. The no answer trigger means that if somebody dialed into the hunt pilot and they actively rang a particular phone, right? Which means the caller heard ringing at this point in time, okay? If the caller heard ringing within my hunting options, then it would automatically utilize this first option. The first option, which is the default, and most of the time this is what you're gonna be using, is that if they don't pick up, so this person doesn't pick up here, then I'm gonna try the next member within my line group. And then, if there was another line group configuration, like let's say this is line group 2, then if there's no more resources here within this first line group, then roll over to the second line group here, okay? So that's what the first option really is talking about here. Try the next member within the group, then if there's another configured line group, go on to the next line group. Okay, 9 times out of 10, you're probably going to pick that first option. Okay? The other options include try the next member within this line group, but do not go on to a second line group if configured. Okay, I don't know if you guys are ever going to have to do that one. Or there's going to be a skip remaining members, and then go directly to the next configured line group. And then there's going to be a stop hunting feature, right? I don't know if anybody's ever going to pick stop hunting, because the idea here with call distribution with hunting is that we don't want to hang up the phone on the caller. So I don't know if you guys are ever going to use stop hunting very often. 9 times out of 10, everybody just picks this first option, okay? And again, the main thing to note about this first option with the no answer trigger is that the caller, on the perspective of the caller, they heard something ring, okay? The reason why I make that a big deal is because there are 2 other options here, known as busy and not available, okay? In the same kind of context that we were talking about before, if a call comes into this 2999 hunt pilot, and at some point it trickles down to the hunt list, and that trickles down to your line group, and then your line group's going to trickle down to your phones. Here's the thing. If your phones are either busy, okay, because they're on a phone with somebody else, right? And or let's say they are unavailable, which means maybe the phone itself is unregistered, right? Or maybe the person was logged out of hunting because they went to lunch or something. The idea is if this was the only person with this line group and you dial that 2999, it does not give the caller any kind of ring back tone, because that phone was never rang in the first place. So in this particular case, there is no ringing that's being experienced by the caller at this point in time. You don't have any resources here. So here's the options that you're going to pick with the busy or not available. You get the exact same options as you get as a no answer trigger, okay? But yeah, you got to think about it this way. On the perspective of the caller, they heard no ringing whatsoever. So either everybody in the line group was either busy and or unregistered because they went out to lunch or something, okay? Which means that if you ever hit that busy or not available, right, it takes literally a split second.
for you to go on to the next resource and the next one and the next one after that. Okay, so that's kind of the difference between these 3 hunt options that you need to know. No answer, caller here's ringing. Busy or not available, caller here's no ringing. Okay. Anyway, as you add in your line group members, you'll notice that I'm putting here 2002, 2003, and 2004 within my line group, right? There's no other real configurations that I have to do here. All I can do now is just simply save my configuration. Okay. So I got a ring no answer reversion timeout in 5 seconds. I know I'm doing circular algorithm, and then I know that I'm putting 2002, 2003, and 2004 within my line group configuration here. The next thing I'm going to do is if I go down to route hunt, and then we just configured the line group. Now I'm going to configure the hunt list. And if you guys can see this hunt list configuration, you'll realize that there's not really any configuration here at all. We just have to name our line group, okay? So, or our hunt list, I mean. So I'm going to name this HL. Okay, let's configure this hunt list thing, okay? You just got to name the hunt list. And then over here, they ask you for a Cisco Unified Communications Manager group. You just got to select some default, okay? Hold on there, folks. I think I gotta manage some more people here. Can you guys make sure to mute your microphones just so that we don't hear that background noise from everybody? Okay. So Cisco Unified Communications Manager Group, you just got to select one, okay? It doesn't really matter which one you select. The only thing that we have to take note of here is just because of the call control process. It depends on who's going to be processing our phone calls that's going to be dialing this 2999. So you can literally pick any call manager group that you have associated with call managers, okay? At this point in time, what I want to do within my hunt list here is I want to add my line group that I've configured. So I'm going to click Add Line Group. I'm going to select the only line group that I've configured here. This is going to tell me exactly which phones I'm going to hunt to. Okay? And as soon as you press Save here, you are good to go. Anybody that gets funneled into this test hunt list will then go to this line group that will then ring my 2003, 2004, and 2005 phones. Okay? You can additionally add other line groups in here too. So if you have like 3 different line groups configured, you can put all 3 line groups here that you want. Okay? But just understand this. Whatever you select here in this field is only going to ever be top-down processing. So if you have 3 different line groups, let's say I have line group 2 and then I also have line group 3 here, that just simply means that I'm going to hunt to line group, the test line group, and then if I've exhausted all resources within that test line group, I can then go and hunt to line group number 2. If all resources are taken over there, then I will go ahead and I will hunt to line group number 3 last. Okay. Again, I don't know if there's a limit to how many line groups that you guys can configure here. I've never hit that maximum, so I don't know if you guys are ever going to encounter that problem here. Okay. If you want to repurpose your line groups, I guess you can always use these up and down arrows to move them up and down, right? Prioritize them differently and or remove them completely from this hunt list. Okay. But this looks good for right now. Let me save this. And then I guess the most difficult configuration is going to come next, right? When we go to route hunt and then when we go to hunt pilot, that's going to be the very last thing that we're going to have to configure here before we start demoing some stuff. Okay? So inside of my hunt pilot, what we're going to configure here is that I'm going to put this as any number. I'm going to put this as 2999 because that's going to be the hunt pilot that I want to create here. There is a part here for partition. This is for, I guess, calling or dialing privileges in Call Manager, if you guys know what that's all about, right? But I'm not going to put a partition here. I just want it to work. In this hunt list, I need to select the hunt list that I'm going to send this call to, right? And if I send it to this hunt list, we know that that hunt list is going to go to my test line group, which will then prioritize all of my phones that I have here, 2002 all the way up to 2004. Okay? So this is really where I'm sending the calls if somebody dials 2999 here. I dial to the hunt list goes to the line group will point to all my phones here. Okay? I guess what students have questions about most with this hunting feature is underneath all of that stuff here, we have what is known as our hunt call treatment settings. Okay? Inside of my hunt call treatment settings, again, there's 2 parts to this. There is the final forward settings, which is what I've highlighted here. And then there's something here known as native call queuing that kind of makes this process seem like a contact center, even though it is not. Okay? So the first portion is the final forward settings. What are you going to do here? You can either pick 1 or 2 options, okay? It's either you're doing final forward settings or you're doing call queuing settings. But you cannot do both. You can do one or the other. What I mean by that is if I checkmark call queuing, just notice what happens with my final forward settings, right? Notice how everything's all grayed out. I can't even select anything, right? If you uncheck call queuing, then I guess what's going to happen is you're doing final forward settings. So you can't do both. You can only do one or the other. So let's talk about final forwarding first, then we will get to call queuing, okay? In the final forwarding settings, what we're going to get here is we're going to get a no answer trigger. And remember what I asked you guys with the line group configuration. What does no answer mean within this hunting process? It means, on the caller's perspective, when they dialed into this hunt pilot, which is 2999, on a no answer trigger, it means that somebody rang, but they did not pick up. So here's what you're going to do with that call if the caller had heard ringing from this hunt process. By default, you're going to not forward unanswered calls. So call manager is going to hang up the call, give you a fast busy at this time, right? If you wanted to do other settings, like for instance, let's do a maximum hunt timer here. Let's make maximum hunt timer like 30 seconds, okay? So what's going to happen here is if I make this 30, it means that I know that there are 3 of these phones that are inside of my line group configuration. It means that in the forward hunt no answer trigger, it's either going to trigger because I've exhausted all of my hunting options. In this case, I've rang all 3 phones and there are no more resources for me to ring. Then what's going to happen is I'm going to listen to this no answer trigger. And or if 30 seconds has elapsed. So whether I run out of hunting resources first or whether this 30-second timer times out first, it is going to listen to this forward no answer trigger. Okay? And so let's talk about some of these other options that you have. There is this other option here that says, well, I want to use a forward setting within the line group member. What does that actually mean, right? So let's say that you call in. You ring 2002 first. He doesn't answer. You ring 2003. She doesn't answer. So you finally ring 2004, and this is the last person that rang within this line group. What's going to happen in this particular case is for 2004, if you had selected use the forward settings for the line group member, you want to send the call to 2004's voicemail in this particular case. But how do you configure that, right? You can't just check mark this use for settings for the line group member. What you would have to do in this particular case, you'd have to go over to the device, or let me save this real quick. You'd have to go to the device, you'd have to go to the phone, and here what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at phone 2004, and you'll notice that in the 2004 directory number configuration, what's going to be here is that you have your call forward and call pickup settings, okay? The particular setting that I'm looking for here is I'm looking for the call forward no coverage internal or external. If you want to send this call to this person's voicemail, you must toggle these two settings here. Either for internal calls, which are calls within your call manager environment, or an external call, a call coming from kind of like the PSTN or some other cluster, or coming from a trunk, if you will, okay? So, but just notice, what we're trying to configure here is call coverage, right? That's what hunting is. So you have to modify these particular settings. If I had gone over here and checkmarked for voicemail, then what would happen here is if 2004 was the last person to be rang within this line group, then it would listen to the setting and forward straight to 2004's voicemail at this point in time. Okay? So that's kind of the configuration option that we have to know about for the call forwarding for the no coverage feature. Okay? You don't have to do voicemail. You can always send it to, say, a 2998. Maybe I send it to another, for instance, what if this was configured to be another hunt list or a hunt pilot, right? So you could send the call to another hunting option, right, if you had it configured like that. Or whatever external number that you want. It's up to you guys, right? But that is the option that we're going to look for when we look at our hunt pilot configurations here. Okay, when this guy is checkmarked for the use forward settings for the line group member. Just know that that basically means that you are hitting the call forward no coverage feature. Okay, and I think Cisco's documentation tells you that. So if you ever use that middle setting, that's kind of what we want to see. Let's say you're not doing the use forward settings for the line group member. Let's say you are checkmarking the forward unanswered calls to and then a specific destination. So at this point in time, I guess the idea here is I can put some destination here and probably put like 2001 or something, right? Let's just transfer the call directly to this other directory number here. So it could go to a phone. It could go to Unity connection. Maybe I want to send it to Unity here. So whatever a Unity connections number is going to be, you could put Unity connections number here so that maybe they hit some kind of an auto attendant, right? And they hear some kind of pre-recorded response or prompts. So yeah, you can put Unity numbers there. You can put contact center numbers there. It's up to you what you want to put there. But you can put any number you want here for the destination, okay? And then there's a calling search space here for dialing privileges. I don't know if I'm going to talk about dialing privileges this week, but there's a calling search space setting here. Okay? There is something that I want to talk about that gets a lot of people, though. Okay? As we know, I do have phone 2002, and that goes all the way to phone 2004. Okay? And I know I've put these 3 phones inside of my line group. Now here's something that I want to ask you guys. If I take 2002, and let's say that in 2002's phone, let's say the person that resides on this phone, they actually hit the call forward all button. And let's say that call forward all button is supposed to go to voicemail at this point in time. Okay? So in this particular case, let's say that somebody dials into this 2999 hunt pilot. And as you know, with that hunt pilot, I'm going to be pointing to go to this hunt list. I know that that hunt list is going to eventually point to a line group, and then I know my line group's going to point over here to my 2002 all the way to my 2004 phones. Now, in this particular case, if 2002 has pressed the call forward all button, and they want the call forward all button to go to voicemail. Okay, what happens when the call gets distributed to this 2002 phone? Do you guys think it's going to go to voicemail? Or do you guys think it's going to ring that 2002 phone? Any thoughts out there? Okay. Well, what's going to happen in this particular case is if you ring or if you try to dial this hunt pilot and you start being funneled into this 2002 phone, even if you have set this setting, call forward all to go to voicemail, it will still ring this particular phone. It won't actually forward to voicemail. And you got to wonder why that happens, right? The reason for that is because originally, did the caller dial 2002? Or did they originally dial the Hunt Pilot number? And I'd say they dialed the original Hunt Pilot number. So really, whatever you toggle here with your call forward settings on phone 2002, it's not going to matter. If they're in the hunt, or I guess if they're in the line group, they're going to be hunted to, okay? Because the call's actually meant for 2999, not for 2002. This phone's just ringing on behalf of the Hunt Pilot, right? So what's going to happen is, even though 2002 is meant to call forward all to voicemail, it's still going to ring this phone for 5 seconds. If he doesn't answer, I guess it's going to keep going down the line until it rings the last person within this line group here, okay? Now, with that, I guess what I should say here is, if you go in here and you send this to the destination of, say, 2002, here's what's going to happen, right? Even though it rings 2002 for 5 seconds and then it rings 2004 for 5 seconds, in this particular case, when you set this call forward unanswered calls to this destination of 2002, what's going to happen is it will take the call out from the hunt, and it will now transfer this call to 2002. So when the call goes to 2002 in this particular case, okay, now I will listen to your call forward settings, because once I send this to this particular destination over here, that is now a transfer. This is now a phone call meant for 2002. So now it will in fact go to this person's voicemail without actually ever ringing this particular phone here, okay? But while you're still in the hunt, it will ignore all of your call forward treatment settings, okay, until you transfer it away with this destination setting right over here, okay? Does that make sense, folks? Questions, concerns? Okay. I guess the other thing that we can talk about here is a forward hunt busy, right? So in this particular case, the forward hunt busy says, I'm going to not forward any kind of busy calls. And you got to think about what these busy calls actually mean, right? Busy to me basically means that the caller's perspective, as they dialed in this 2999 Hunt Pilot, as they tried to hunt to all of these different phones within my line group, it just basically means that nobody was available. The caller didn't hear ringing whatsoever. So literally, they exhausted all resources just like that, right? So in this case, because you didn't hear any ringing whatsoever, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give you a fast busy because no one was available, right? That's kind of what this option is. Or you could always use the forward settings within the line group member. Remember what this means. This basically means a call forward no coverage option within the directory number settings of your phones. Okay, I think we saw that already. So you can configure that, and or I guess you can configure the forward busy calls, and you can specify this to go to a certain destination, just like how you did that within the last example here. Okay, remember, when you forward busy calls to this particular destination, this is known as a transfer. Okay, so again, that means that you're not part of the hunt anymore. It's literally a direct transfer to anything else, right? And I guess you could put anything there. You could put a directory number there. You could put another Hunt Pilot number here, like let's say it's a 2998, and let's say that was another Hunt Pilot. That is also possible, folks. Okay, you can send it to Unity Connection. Go to an auto antenna. Okay, make them hear some kind of spoken prompts or something. Okay, but again, the main focus here: caller heard ringing with the no answer trigger. Caller doesn't hear ringing, but they exhausted all resources at this time. Okay, and I guess let's test this out, right? I'm going to forward unanswered calls to 2001, and I'm going to save this here. And I guess we should test this out so that you guys can see how this works, right? Remember, the phones that are inside of my line group here is 2002, 2003, and 2004. And I'm going to ring things in a circular fashion. So I'd assume that I'd ring 2002 first, then 2003, then 2004. And you'll notice that 2001 over here is not part of my line group. I'm going to make the call from this 2001 phone. But what's going to happen here is I'm going to forward all calls that aren't answered, okay, if you exhaust all hunting, to 2001. So at some point, that original phone that I'm going to make the phone call from, the call's going to come back to this guy, okay? So new call, 2999. I'm going to ring 2002 for 5 seconds. It's going to roll over to 2003, ring that for 5 seconds, and I guess it's going to roll over to 2004 for 5 seconds. Because nobody answers within my line group, it's going to come back over to my 2001. Okay? So that is kind of the configuration that we have seen there for the unanswered calls. Okay? Another thing that you guys will notice here is that there's something out there known as native call queuing. Okay, this was added in, I believe, like Call Manager version, I think it was like version 8 or 9, right? But with native call queuing, again, you cannot do final forward settings and call queuing at the same time. It must be done mutually exclusive. So here, what we are going to do is we're going to check mark native call queuing, and you'll and just to show you guys the difference here, I'm just going to save this. And I'm going to dial into my Hunt Pilot one more time, and you guys will see exactly what's going to happen here. Let me call 2003, and let me conference that with 2004. So now I got conferences between these three phones here, right? Which means that they're not available at this time, right? Here's what's going to happen when you dial that 2999 number. I don't know if you guys can hear that or not, but basically what I'm hearing right now is I'm hearing music on hold, right? So you are getting music on hold here with the native call queuing that you didn't get before. So if you want music on hold, if you want this hunting thing to act more like or kind of behave more like a contact center, what we would configure here is the native call queuing instead of the final forward settings, right? Because if everybody's busy, I don't necessarily want to make a routing decision and send the call somewhere else. I might just want to queue the call up and hear music on hold until somebody becomes available, right? And notice what happens when I end this call for 2004. The call is going to transfer from the 2001 queue all the way over to 2004 when I end the call here. See that? So it takes me out of music on hold, and now there's a phone call ringing for this 2004 phone, right? So, as far as the configuration option goes, when we look at the native call queuing, here's some of the things that you guys will have to take note of, right? There's a network music on hold source. You can define this, or it can already be defined based on a device pool, okay? So you can select what kind of music on hold people hear when they're queued. And again, queued calls means people aren't available, right? Which means people are either on the phone, they're logged out of the hunt, their phone was unregistered. That's the only time you get to hear music on hold. Because if people are available, it's going to go directly to that resource, right? There's a maximum number of callers allowed in queue, and you can see some of the defaults that are set here, 32 for the default, but I guess you can make this all the way up to 100 people waiting in queue, right? So there's 32 here that's configured. What happens when the 33rd phone caller is queued up? Well, by default, I'm going to disconnect that call. And or you can route it to another destination. Okay, like maybe another Hunt Pilot, auto attendant from Unity Connection, an IP IVR, okay, for any other kind of auto attendant functionality, right? So you can send this anywhere you want for people that are maximum calls in queue. And then after that, there's a maximum wait time that we have to worry about too. This maximum wait time is by default in seconds, so 900 seconds, right? And you can see the maximum here that you can configure is, I guess, 3600, okay? Which is a lot of time, to be totally honest. So if this is 900, I guess what happens when the person's in queue for 901 seconds, right? So if they're past 900 seconds in queue, I guess they disconnect from the call, and or I guess you can also route this to another destination if you wish. Okay. And then I guess when no hunt members answer, okay, which means somebody rang the phone but they didn't answer, and or nobody's logged in, or nobody's registered to pick up this phone call, what's going to happen is you're going to disconnect the call. And or I guess you can always send this to another destination of your choosing. Okay? So those are the things to consider when you're configuring hunting. It's either you're configuring these final forward settings, which do not give you music on hold. Okay, it will just hunt to the resource. If you don't have a resource available, it's going to make a routing decision here. Okay, so you don't get music on hold here. If you want music on hold, I guess you're going to have to configure queuing in this case. So it's one or the other, folks. Okay. All right, well, I will stick around in case you guys have those questions. Let me know. Just unmute your microphones, ask me, and then I'll try to work things out with you guys if you guys have any questions. So just let me know.